This is the third in a series of videos on hoarders. And I will remind you that I am not a mental health professional. I'm not a therapist. This is just based on my experience working with lots of people and just the knowledge I've acquired over the years. So today we're going to be talking about the who and why of hoarders. So why do people hoard? For some people, it's something they picked up during their childhood. They may have had parents who hoard and they kind of absorb that angst that their parents had and that they get comfort from things. So that's one type of person who might hoard. For a lot of people, it has to deal with the fact that they had a great loss. It may be that they lost a child and didn't deal with their grief and their trauma from that. So they basically cover up their hurt by hoarding things. It may be that they got divorced and didn't see it coming. You know, for a lot of women, older women, you know, you put all your life into your husband and supporting him and your kids and raising them, and then husband up and leaves you. It can just be devastating. So for a lot of those people, they kind of pull into themselves and then they look for comfort elsewhere, which starts out as shopping because shopping makes you feel good, and that turns into hoarding. So that sometimes is an issue. For some people, it was growing up with a mindset of lack during their childhood. Maybe they were very, very poor and never had anything. So they tend to hold on to everything. And again, that's just kind of very basic. That doesn't cover everything. For some people, it truly is a mental illness, and you need a mental health professional for that. So let's talk about some of the ways in which people hoard. All right, so first of all, let's talk about the scarcity mindset. For a lot of people, older people, you know, they were brought up during the Depression or by parents who lived through the Depression. So there's that scarcity mindset of, I better hold on to this because I might need it sometime. And I hear that a lot from my seniors, but what if I need it? So they hold on to everything because they're afraid of doing without. One of the things that COVID triggered in a lot of people was the need to stockpile food and items. Because let's face it, we live in a country richer than most countries, and I've never in my whole life gone to a store and found shelves empty of food. I need something, I go stop at a store around the corner and I pick up whatever I want. But all of a sudden, COVID comes along and people were stockpiling things, and you'd go to the store and there were empty shelves. You couldn't find certain types of food. And that triggered something in a lot of people to where people started to hoard food because, you know, the last thing you ever want to do is starve. So that triggered something in a lot of people. As I said, loss for a lot of people. If you've lost a lot of family members, you know, we all lose our grandparents, then we lose our parents. But if you don't deal with your loss or you lose a child, then the things that that person owned are very sentimental to you. And that kind of creates an issue where you don't want to let go of anything that had to do with that person. Also, I had a client years ago who, as a child, was very adored. She had several relatives who had never had children, never married, and spoiled her beyond belief. She was just a princess as she was growing up. Well, you know, to the point where they gave her everything and lots of portraits and all kinds of things. So then when they passed away eventually, she didn't have that. So anything having to do with those relatives, and there was a lot of that, she held on to, and there was no letting go of that. But also then in her adult life, she was constantly kind of, I think subconsciously chasing that feeling of wanting to be adored, wanting to feel good, have beautiful things, and she shopped a lot online. The first day I worked with her, literally sat in her foyer and just opened up packages that had sat there, many of them for years, deciding whether it was something she was going to keep or something she was going to donate. Because it was the finding the thing and ordering it that made her feel good. The getting it really wasn't the point. So for a lot of people, this has to do with sentimentality and just not being able to let go of things related to something or someone they lost, because they think if they let that go, that they lose the feelings for that person. For some people, it kind of starts as decor, you know, making a beautiful home for your family when you have kids and everything, and decorating for the holidays. And then it just snowballs, especially with the stores they have nowadays that you can go into and find all kinds of decorations for holidays. And they shop and they shop and they shop because they want to make these wonderful holidays for their family. Of course, as your kids get older, they don't come around as much, and you're still decorating the house, and next thing you know, you've got way more stuff than you have room for, and that kind of snowballs. So that's one way to talk about things. For some people, and I'll talk about this from a personal note, I'm a very creative person, and I've got some ADD. As a teenager, I made most of my own clothes, which was something we did back in the 70s. So anything having to do with material, thread, I learned how to crochet, I did needlepoint, I did all of that when I was younger and took that with me into my adult life. Now, when we had our farmhouse, I had a crafting room. I had all kinds of material, all kinds of sewing things, all kinds of yarn, knitting needles, even though I barely knew how to knit, crocheting booklets, things like that. I had made jewelry at different times. I did scrapbooks for me and my kids. I had all kinds of stuff in that crafting room. I mean, it was stuffed because my mind is always like that. I have all these ideas that I want to do. And I even find that now I have to be very careful. I mean, currently in my life, I told you I clean out my office at the beginning of every January. One of the reasons is I start projects. So, I mean, currently I work part-time doing my downsizing business. I do Downsizing Pro, which is my social media. I'm working on my third book. I have plans for a fourth. And I work part-time as a life coach. I'm one of those people that's just got a whole bunch of stuff going on all the time, and it's always like I want another project. For some people, like especially you'll find this with men, they'll see an appliance that's not working. Well, they can tinker with that. They can make it work. So they start bringing things home that people are throwing out because they hate to see people throwing things out. You know, there's a bicycle. Well, I can fix that. Well, there's a piece of furniture missing a leg. I can fix that. But the problem is after a while you end up with so many projects, and if you're like me with the ADD, it's like, oh, where do I go next? You know, you can't focus on anything. So for a lot of people who are maybe have some ADD, maybe are very creative, maybe are very handy, they see value in everything and they want to, you know, take care of and do everything. The one hoarder estate that I did, the woman had done some beautiful like pillows and wall hangings, quilted, really beautiful work. But again, that had snowballed. Part of what her hoard was a tremendous amount of fabric. I had tables and tables with, yes, like the squares you buy for, what do they think they call them, quarter yard for quilting. She had a ton of that stuff, but bolts and bolts and bolts of fabric. I mean, that she had seen and she had liked because, oh, she's going to do something with that. So part of her hoard was fabric. Actually, when I think about it, the other hoarding house that I did, she had a tremendous amount of fabric and had a sewing room set up. And again, it was just overflowing because, you know, you see trims and you see, you know, sewing notions and buttons. I used to have a ton of buttons. So yeah, that stuff, when you're a creative person, that just kind of snowballs sometimes into a full hoard. Some people are very tactile. And by that, I mean they like to touch things. And people who have shopping addictions and who buy way too much clothes and things often are very tactile people. When I'm working with a client and we're sorting through clothes, I try not to let them touch them because if they touch them, then they want to keep them. It's just a sensory thing. So a lot of your people with the shopping addiction and buying a bargain, you know, if you see something, again, that kind of goes back to that mindset of lack. Well, if I can get this and it's only $1, $2, $5, well, that's such a great buy, I can't pass it up. So for a lot of your people who have shopping addictions and who use shopping to kind of fill themselves up if they have an emptiness in them because of a loss, that snowballs really badly. And, you know, pretty things, jewelry, shoes, handbags, all of that. So thrifting is great, but you have to keep it in check. Then, of course, you have the collectors, as my parents were. People who go to auctions or flea markets, again, thrifting, who collect certain things. And don't know when to quit. Again, this was a good buy. This was a good price. Oh, look how pretty it is. My mother bought anything that had violets on it. We had a huge dining room table that we used once, maybe twice a year, but that was always set with all kinds of plates and candlesticks and salt and pepper and sugar bowls and cake plates. Anything that had violets on, that table was covered with things that had violets on when we weren't there using that table. So for some people, collecting snowballs into hoarding. Some people, it's an issue with paper, especially in this digital world. Those of us who are older are used to paper stuff, and there's kind of security in that. So while the younger people, they scan everything into the computer, have everything digital, their bills and everything come digital, some of us old dinosaurs still keep paper. So for some people, paper hoarding is really serious. I told you before I did an estate, and in the basement, there was one of those like hard file things from a library or whatever that had every receipt of every single thing they've ever bought. A lot of people will keep just, oh, you can't imagine, like clippings. That was a thing in the day. You used to get magazines and things like that, and you'd clip out an article you wanted to see. And people who have files and files and files of clippings of places they want to go or things they want to see or crafts they want to do. So paper hoarding is a very serious issue. Again, it's kind of a little bit of, I think, a tactile thing, but it's just kind of wanting to hold on to things, not liking the digital and feeling that you need to hold on to some of that for security and everything. So that's just a broad range of some of the types of things you'll find with people who hoard. It certainly isn't comprehensive, and there are some people who just hoard everything. As I said before, I won't address pets because that's not something I've dealt with, but there are people who hoard animals, and very sadly into a state that the animals are suffering, but the whole reason behind them hoarding them is because they want to save them from dying. So that's again, very serious issue, and I think a certain amount of mental illness there. So I hope that helps some of you understand who hoards and why they hoard.